So.
Right. Hey, we're back. It's another episode of Conversations About God. I'm Ryan McKenzie. He's Casey Staggs, Dave Boughton. And we took it from you. We're making this happen today. And we're going through a whole month of really tough questions. We've heard your feedback. Our fans in Romania, they want to hear Dave Boughton a little better, so I'm moving the mic closer to you today.
Prost.
I don't know what that means. But they like you, so we're good. We got some tough questions. If you've been checking out Northwest Church, this whole month we're talking about what's the deal with hell? Why would God send people to hell? Can you be gay and be a Christian? What does the Bible say about politics? Was Jesus a Democrat or Republican? What does the Bible say about slavery? Like all kinds of things like that. Like why does the Bible promote slavery? Or
I think he was a publican. No, sorry.
All right. Well, we're going to dive into some tough questions that we've gotten from some of you. Some people have sent in questions to us. We've had a couple teachings at Northwest, so go check those out if you want to see the full versions of those. We're not going to reteach those teachings because they're right here on YouTube. You can check them out for yourself. But we've got some questions that I want to ask these guys, and then we're going to talk through. If you got other tough questions, send them in. If you want to be a sponsor of this podcast, send us money. We'll be good to go.
Just send it.
Send it, yeah.
No paperwork.
No, we're good. It's really simple format.
Unmarked envelopes, please.
Large bills. Thank you. All right. You ready to do this?
We will also, if you say that you'd like to pay us to stop, we could also do that.
That's very true.
You want to throw the podcast today? Just really make it bad?
Let's do this. If you want us to quit this podcast, send us $1,000. We'll split it amongst ourselves. We'll go from there. Because we got tons of other podcasts we could do. I got all kinds of names for podcasts. Anyway, first question. Let's dive into this. How does it feel to be 2-3 and losing to me in fantasy football? Sorry, that's not the question.
That's for Dave.
That's for Dave. Why?
I'm undefeated.
Dave is beating all of us. All right, real questions. Why doesn't God just restrict our freedom and allow us to feel His love? So the idea of if we sin, we're far from Him, we can't be with Him, right? We can't feel His love if we're not in close relationship with Him. So why doesn't God just stop us from having the freedom to go away from Him? Why doesn't He restrict our freedom and allow us to feel His love? Any takers on this one?
Well, we were talking about it, the three of us, before we hit the record button here, and just drawing parallels to what relationships look like on this level between humans and comparing it to
like this level,
like you and me right here, this closeness, and how we can compare it to our relationship with God. And Dave made a great point of the standard that we're wanting to hold God to. We would not be okay with that same standard between two humans, like forcing someone to stay in a relationship or forcing someone else to love them. I mean, that is abusive, right? That's something that people go to jail for, trying to do that. And somehow we want to hold God to that same standard and say this is how it should be, when we wouldn't be okay with it on the human level. So it's weird how we do that, where we don't really look at, okay, do you really know what you're asking for? Do you really know what kind of relationship you're describing? And it doesn't make sense on any other level, so why would it make sense between us and God?
I like that a lot.
I like the questions because the reality is when we engage with freedom, and whether it's a theological perspective on what is freedom or how does freedom work itself out in a society, it is complicated. And so I can appreciate that people would have these questions and want to work through them. Yeah. So I like the questions that we have and that they're even being raised, because it's a real thing. But I kind of hang my hat on that. Like whatever we want to try to think about in terms of God, we got to workshop that on how it interacts here with relationships that we have that are face to face. And I think it's troubling when you're trying to wrestle with how does this freedom apply to me, and when I start acting in a way that there's this book that was written thousands of years ago by people who say they believed in God and God spoke to them and gave them these directives. When that comes in and rubs against what I want to do, then I'm going to have issues and I'm going to start raising questions like this. So I'm not surprised that people raise it. But I also don't want to discount it, because interacting with freedom, and when something comes in and tries to speak against what I'm freely doing, that's hard to internalize and believe. So like I just want to recognize the overall frustrating or complicated aspects of this. Like I grant it, totally see it.
And talking about freedom, it is something that Christ died for, right? Like he died so that Galatians 5 says Christ set us free for freedom's sake, right? So like a price was paid for us to even have that freedom because through what he did on the cross. So it is something that God elevates and showed his love to us through it. So for us to not appreciate it or not want it, it can be tough. So I'm so thankful that God has given us the free will to choose him, and it wasn't just freely given. Like a price was paid for us to have that free will through Christ.
And it's not just freedom from consequences, but I'm now free to go toward something else. Yeah. So it's not just a restrictive thing.
Right.
So there's another question that kind of goes along with it. These are all kind of dealing with sin, hell in a way. So I think that's the context we're bringing it into. So the follow-up would be, why can't he remove sin and just make love one-sided? So I asked the guy who asked us this, I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, like, you say we love God, he loves us. Why do we have to love him? Why can't is he not good enough or strong enough to just love us and that's enough? So why can't he remove sin? So maybe put another like context around this question too. Like it can be really easy to, in theory, say, yeah, that makes sense because I don't want to be tempted to sin anymore. But like sin doesn't just impact me when I sin, but like maybe somebody else's sin hurt somebody in my family and they weren't a believer, and now there's some tough consequences to sin that happen a lot of times. So there's a lot of nuance to that, but like, why can't he remove sin and make love one-sided where he's the one giving it?
All right, I really like this question. Why can't love be one-sided from God to us?
Yeah.
Well, it kind of largely is like, but the thing that makes love maximally beautiful is when two people are participating in it. Because like if I think about it in relationship to my spouse, right? If I'm the only one loving, then that's a very stale relationship. It's not actually love from them. They're just on the receiving end of it. That's kind of selfish when you just are always a taker of love.
Yeah.
So we're arguing for a very selfish position where I don't want to do any of the work to sacrifice in order to love or to give back to the relationship. If it's just one-sided in that way, we would call that unfair. We would say that's a deeply self-centered approach to it. So those are the initial things that come to my mind when I hear that.
And I think just about our initial design, like God designed us to love him, to honor him, to glorify him with everything we do. And does that change? I'm just thinking through that doesn't change God, right? Like us doing that can't change him. So the only thing is it has to change us. It has to benefit us by loving him, by glorifying him, by honoring him. Yeah. And kind of similar to what we were talking about the last time we recorded is, for us to truly glorify him, I think his spirit has to be moving inside of us, right? So it's, again, such a loving thing that God allows us to love him, because it's like prayer, right? Prayer isn't for God, it's for us, like what it does to us. I think it's the same thing where if God is just loving us and leaving no room for us to love him, we're missing out on so much from him because what it does to our hearts and what it does to our lives.
Yeah, I like that. Two thoughts on this that I think helped me a ton. I don't know if I heard you say it, but I think it's a C.S. Lewis quote.
Get those two confused.
Yeah, Dave and C.S. Lewis are just like
cousins,
very closely related. But if you have a being that is the most beautiful, powerful, the best, like has the most good ever, is the most perfect being in the universe, the most loving thing that being could do was create something to worship him. And I first heard that, I was like, that sounds weird, man. I don't know, because like on our human level, like I like want someone to look at me or honor me or worship me in that way. It feels like selfish, but like we don't know anyone like that. So like to make love one-sided, the Bible does say we can only love because he loved us. right? That's the only reason we even know what love is in the first place. So it very much is one-sided in that regard. But then he invites us in to see the most beautiful thing ever. So if it was only one-sided and he only let it go this way, we would never experience the beauty and the amazingness of him and see it from the other way as well. So like it's that relationship. But so the first part of the question, this is one of the biggest things for me. Why can't he remove sin? Which, like, I guess if we're talking about hell, which is how this question kind of gets sprung up a little bit, is like kind of, well, why can't you just stop sin so I won't go to hell? Why can't you just stop sin so other people won't go to hell? And that makes me think, like, where down the line how much do you remove? Because if it's me, I no longer exist if he's removing sin. Like, if it's just like I'm not just like I'm killing people who have sinned, right? I'm getting rid of them, but like just the fact that there is sin, I can't exist then, because there's never been a day that I haven't sinned. Like, if you're honest with yourself, and we can be like, which sparks the question: well, why do you even go to hell in the first place, right? But there's what's the line? Like, would Hitler be in hell?
Yeah.
Like, all the way up to like, how perfect do you have to be to like remove sin perfectly? It's like, so Jesus, like the Father, the Son, the Spirit, back to the only ones that ever existed, which goes back to like the most loving thing they could do is create something to be a part of that relationship.
Sure.
So like, kind of defeats itself, but like it's a really amazing question, because you see all this awful stuff, and it's like, why does that have to even exist? And it just goes right back to his love again, which is wild.
Yeah. I think some of it, like who's asking the question is also important. I think it's as important as the question is, from what perspective is this question coming? Is it from somebody who does believe that there's a God? If so, then great, I get that. If it's from somebody who does not believe in God, then I go, well, this is it just you're trying to throw darts at this idea that somebody believes in God? They're two different approaches. But to the person who's granting that there's a God, right? Like, if it's coming from that perspective, or even a Christian who's struggling through this, I go, there is a sense where you have to go, but this is the universe we're living in. Yeah. Like, you're raising this, why didn't he do this? That distracts from the universe we're actually in. If we just want to stay in hypotheticals all day long, we can do that, but it's not going to be productive. It doesn't help us with the reality that we actually have, which we do see people who choose to love just each other and exclude everybody else in the world from their romantic relationship. And that is a more beautiful type of love than just loving anybody equally. Like, it doesn't make somebody feel special if you're just loving everybody equally that way in the sense of a romantic relationship. And so the whole idea of, if you remove sin and choice and all this stuff, it makes for a very stale, less beautiful thing. It does give room for the possibility for really horrific things and betrayal, even, right? Because if you love your wife, but then your wife cheats on you, or vice versa, then there's also the possibility for horrible betrayal.
So like, if the guy who lives at the end of my street moves out and leaves my neighborhood, I'm like, man, I wanted to get to know him, right? If my wife gets up and moves out, that hurts so much more. The love is so much deeper. So there's when you do love deeply, there's a possibility for that kind of hurt in a bigger way. But that just shows how deep the love was too, you know? Like,
and that God comes in and says, from my end, I'll never betray you.
Right.
Like, it means that even when your human relationships fail you and those fall apart, I'm still going to be here to back you. Like, there's some beauty in that, and you are choosing, and he is choosing in that relationship to bind to you. I think that answers a lot more of the question for me personally, as to like, why does he not do all kinds of things? He's if we're going to grant that he's out there and that he's actually in here, in this universe, all the way down to living in me, he's so much smarter than me that he has reasons for allowing all these things that are beyond my comprehension, because I've only been here for 39 years now and he has always existed. So for me to ask these questions, go ahead and ask them, but just know that he might have reasons that are beyond your ability to understand.
That's good. We got one last question about this same topic, but I have another one to throw in here for Casey. Casey and I went to a baseball game last Thursday night, Rays Red Sox. Casey wanted to go get a drink and a snack. So we got up from our seats with my son.
I didn't.
And we decided to get up and go to the...
Someone distracted me who was at the game.
Let me ask my question. Why did you not want to catch the foul ball that came to our seats while we were gone?
I did. So, funny story. We're in foul ball territory, right? The entire game.
Foul
Front
ball
row.
Upper deck.
Upper
It's
deck.
already
kind of
hilarious.
offset. Yeah. And we had some friends that were at the game who knew what section we were in. Prior to that, balls were flying left and right, short. Just we're getting close. We could feel that a foul ball was coming our way. Some friends come down. We go into the concourse. I didn't go because I needed a drink. I went to go chat with them. Ryan and his son followed. So we were out there for about 10 minutes. We come back, walking back to our section. There's two paramedics and an old man with an ice pack up to his chest. So then I asked a cop who was standing there just kind of monitoring the game. I'm like, did he get hit with a foul ball? He's like, yeah, he got hit with a foul ball. So then we walked down to our seats. Where that old man was sitting was directly behind our seats. So
right behind Casey.
The ball went right where we were. No one in that section was paying attention. I guess they were all on our phone. The ball comes zipping by their heads and drills the old man in the chest.
Yeah, he was 80 years old, got hit in the chest with a foul, like a 100-mile-an-hour foul ball. He was
that's the funny part?
that
he got hurt?
No, the funny part is
you
that
guys
Casey...
are bad people.
The 10
Casey's
minutes
fault.
that we were gone is exactly when the foul ball came.
The guy next to us is like, I don't know, I didn't see it. I was looking at my phone. And I asked, like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I didn't see it. I just felt I was looking at my phone the whole time. I was like, pay attention to the game, people. All right.
Man, what if that hit him in the nose?
If Casey was there, probably would have hit right in the... It could have hit him right in the face.
My fault.
That
It would have bounced off your forehead. I would have caught the foul ball. My son would have come home with a foul ball. This is all your fault. Okay.
That would have been funny.
Back to the reason we're
You
here.
guys talking about an old guy getting hit, that's not funny.
It's not funny.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm just
clarifying. Yeah.
On record.
Good commentary.
Back to
That's what I'm
cruel...
here
Back to cruel things. Because this is the next question. It ties right in like that segue. Isn't it cruel to even let us dumb humans choose to leave him? Is it cruel to let us humans, and this he worded it, let us dumb humans choose to leave God? Why doesn't he just do it differently? It's kind of like the sub-question behind that.
Yeah. You said that this one was for me? Is that what you said?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it cruel to like just stand up and leave a ball game when I'm trying to get a foul ball for my son?
Just get over it, man. Jeez. Forgiveness. Jeez. I think this is a really similar question to the first one that we asked, right? So again, putting it in context of a human relationship, we wouldn't be okay with that. We wouldn't be okay with not having options in a relationship and being forced to stay in a relationship.
Like if your wife was not freely your wife, but you just forced her to be your wife.
So in arranged marriage, right? In society, we've determined it's not okay, and we've progressed in certain parts of the world, not all parts of the world, right? Because we determined that's not right. We want the freedom to choose our spouse.
I have an interesting perspective on that, but go ahead.
Yeah.
You also lost half of our overseas viewership.
I'm not saying that's my belief. I'm saying it was one way at a point, right? And it's not that way everywhere in the world. Yeah. So, but in the same context, we wouldn't be okay with that relationship with God in us. So, everything I said for the first question apply it to the third.
You have a different view?
Isn't it cruel to allow somebody to walk away from you? You'd be arrested in this world if you treated your relationships that way. If you didn't allow people to leave.
So, yes, but in this context, I think it's centered around hell. So, like the idea of like, I'd rather, like the idea is like, isn't it cruel to let me choose not to serve you or not to do good things, and instead I go to hell? Like, why do you let me choose that? It's kind of where it's going. Because I agree with that in our world, but like if the other option is not you going to hell, other than being with me, it'd be So it's
smarter people have answered this question, so I'll quote them. Right. Okay. So C.S. Lewis says it like this. He goes, "There are those."
You or C.S. Lewis?
My cousin.
Yeah. Okay.
So C.S. Lewis says there are those in this life who say to God, "Thy will be done." Like they bend their knee to it, they accept it, and say, "You're the way, the truth, and life." And then he goes, and then there are those to whom God says, "Thy will be done." He's a gentleman in that way, where he allows you the choice to either bind yourself to him or bind yourself to any number of other things. And he's basically seconding your motion, where you're like, all right, then he's saying, have it your way. If you don't want it to be my way, have it your way. C.S. Lewis in another place also says the gates of hell are locked from the inside. Those people want to be not in the presence of God. And so he's ultimately giving them their self-choice, not necessarily sending them to hell, although in a sense he does. But he's saying, you wanted this. And if we had said it's the opposite, then the arguments would come from the opposite. I think it's just telling of what the human heart does to these kinds of issues. Is like, well, I want it this way. Well, if you say I want it this way, well, no, I want it that way.
That's a really good point.
I have that in my own family where, like, I'll say, hey, we're doing this on this date. And they're like, no, we want it to be this. And I'm like, well, I can't do it on that date. And then they'll say, well, now I know that you want to do that. So, and I'm, okay, you set me up to fail.
I have that for dinner every night. It's like, well, I want this. Well, we can't have that. But that's what I really want. Okay, we can have it. Well, now I know what this. Because you change. It definitely, we're built that way. I think it proves the thought is like, okay, what if God just said, okay, yeah, let's do it another way.
It's just the rebellion within us.
And we have two ways now. There would be something in me that would be like, nah, I want a third way.
Yeah.
And once you get a third way, you're like, no. But you're not letting me do it this way. Like, there's always, like, the fact that we can't. He's provided a way out. The fact that he has come and, given up everything for us to be with him, and what in John 3 says, he came not to condemn the world, but to save the world from condemnation. Like, we were condemned already. He came for us. And made a way for us when there was no way at all. And the fact that we reject the one way is proof that we would reject two ways or three ways. But the fact that it's his way is what we're rejecting, not that it should be a different way. I have a verse on it. Or
still on this.
Yeah.
My other cousin, D.A. Carson.
Carson?
This is a harder quote about hell, but he says, hell is not filled with people who are deeply sorry for their sins. It is filled with people who, for all eternity, still shake their puny fist in the face of God Almighty. It's a pride thing. It's the pride in the human heart, which doesn't want God to rule it. Mm-hmm. For eternity, you get that.
Yeah.
You going, I still don't want it. Like, that's what hell, the worst of hell is that.
Right.
That we get yourself forever.
So I love this question because I think it really reflects our culture right now. There's a couple shows that I watch that are like, I think are really fantastically written. If you watch the new Loki series or the Marvel's What If, like, the whole premise behind it is like, well, why did it have to be that way? Mm-hmm. Like couldn't we just go back and change something? Why? And so like, I like the show because it just makes you think and it's fun and like, but at the same time, if you don't, there is this underlying theology in that show that's like, God doesn't really know what he's doing. Like, the person who set this up, the timekeeper, whatever, doesn't really know what's happened. He's actually evil when you find out that, sorry, spoiler, like, he's actually the new bad guy. Like, there's a better way, there's another way. We have to go back, rebel against it, reject against it, and make it our own way because we know the way that's better. And that is the underlying feeling in our culture right now. And it's becoming more and more prevalent, like the freedom issue and the, like with COVID, like, it's a really big thing in our culture. Like, isn't it better to be safe than free? And then with this, isn't it better just that, like, underneath it all, we know, like, it shouldn't be this way. It should be a different way. We know what's better. Those are two things that are coming up. I think they've kind of always been there to some extent, but they're really being pushed hard right now through our culture. So it's really interesting to me.
Another interesting thing on all the questions is ultimately all that's going to go away in heaven.
I like this.
Right?
I like where you're going with this, yeah.
So with all the things like, why doesn't he do this? Why doesn't he do that? Stay in the game. It'll all be done. Yeah. All that stuff won't be possible anymore. Yeah. And so if you stay in the game, you get it. See, again, my cousin C.S. Lewis said, if you aim at earth, you get neither heaven nor earth. But if you aim at heaven, you get heaven and earth thrown in. Mm-hmm. So if you go through this time of testing or whatever you want to call it, where you have to deal with this frustrating aspect of existence, if you stay in that with your aim being heaven, you get the thing where there's not going to be any walking away from him. There aren't going to be tears. There's not going to be sin. There's not going to be any of that. All that gets resolved at the end. If you don't like that, I don't know of a better story. I don't know of a better reality where that gets set up to be that way, and it's not there on the table. What we have on the table is what he's given us.
I've never even thought about that from a evangelistic standpoint. Like, if these are real questions that people have, it's like, you want an answer, the answer is only in heaven. Like, that is the only place it's going to make sense. Let me show you how we can get there. And
you turn it back on the person asking it. Well, do you have a way that this is possible? How could you remove sin? How could you? The only way is when heaven comes to earth and God does away with all sin, because Jesus Christ.
But it only works if they're being honest and not just trying to poke holes, right? But if they're like, man, this is a real question I have. And like, hey, we will know one day. Let me tell you how you can find that out.
And this is the best possible path to get there.
Right.
Awesome. I think that wraps things up. That's awesome, guys. Hey, go talk to somebody what they believe about heaven and hell this week. Pick somebody's brain. Test that. I dare you.
Pick their brain with an actual tool. Get in there.
But if you're at a baseball game, don't leave in the middle of the game to get a snack.